Hello, welcome everybody to Rebel High Command Cast, an Imperial Assault podcast for 2022 and beyond. This podcast is hosted by the IACommand YouTube channel and sponsored by listeners like you through Patreon. If you want to support IA content in 2022, head over to patreon.com/IACommand and become a patron today. This is episode 9. I am your host, TV Boy, aka Noah, and I am joined by my co-host, TheSecondFlock, aka Wesley. Wesley, how are you doing?
Hey guys, how's it going? I have been going through quite a few things, so I haven't been able to participate as much in a lot of these December events we've been having, but I have been watching from the sidelines nonetheless.
Well, I hope everything's going okay with you. Um, but yeah, we've been pretty busy with all these tournaments. Even though I've been away, so I came back early December, and I've been just trying to catch up. Man, it is hard coming back to work after being off for like 2 weeks, and then they just have there's just so much going on. So yeah, I've been getting back into it. You know, you got to get work stuff cleared out first, and then you can work on fun stuff like Imperial Assault YouTube channel and podcast and all that stuff. Uh, so, um, all right, well, we'll do our community updates here. There's actually quite a bit to share, I know, this round. First, a huge thank you to Jessica, Robert, Loop FC, Derek, Benjamin, and Sean for supporting IA Command and continuing Imperial Assault YouTube content into the future. Go to patreon.com/icommand if you want to help support the channel. All donations are hugely appreciated and help to offset operation, subscription, and equipment costs of running a YouTube channel and a podcast. Huge news. First off, the IACommand Rebel High Command cast is now available in podcast form on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So if you are someone who enjoys listening to podcasts through those apps, definitely check us out there. And remember to leave a 5-star review if you like the podcast. Doing so helps promote the visibility of the cast to other players who are looking for IA content. Second huge piece of news, IACP Community Championship kits have been announced to support in person IACP play. These kits feature full art and alternate art cards for Maul, the Darksaber, Imperial Retrofitting, and Heir to the Jedi, along with a cool double compartment hinged box featuring artwork of Maul commissioned exclusively for the IACP, and plastic standees with stickers to represent IACP figures that are not currently available as IA or Legion figures. Check out the IACP website for previews of the cards and prizes included in each kit. We are ordering these for folks and asking only that people cover the cost of the order. We are not selling these for any kind of profit. Kits are estimated to cost about $40 depending on shipping. We'll let you know with your order how much it costs so we can get reimbursed. Check out the article linked in the description for instructions on how to get a 2023 Community Championship kit for your community. Alright, now back to the show. Alright, and we are back. So let's get into some of the other stuff, fun stuff, and we'll get into our main talk. And I should mention, by the way, we are going to be talking about the map. Devaron Garrison is going to be our main topic. I thought we had a lot of fun with that episode about the Bespin Tabana facility that after it rotated in, and I wanted to cover the other maps in rotation before they rotate out in the next 3 or 4 months we established, so that will be fun. We're also going to go over the results from the two mini tournaments that happened in December. We had two 4-player tournaments that's going to be joined into a finals, so we're going to talk about the results of that before as well. But let's get into our comms chatter section where we listen to or we talk about listener email or comments from our previous episodes. And if you want to have your question answered or comment read on the air, please leave a comment on the YouTube episode or send an email to iacommand01@gmail.com. Alright, so we had a comment on our last episode's YouTube video. Dylan commented about wanting to see uh, playing a campaign with experienced players on the YouTube channel since he's noticed that most content out there with campaign is usually either beginners or people that are not super experienced with campaign or strategy. And I saw this and I thought probably not me. Like having a full campaign, getting that scheduled and recorded, that is tough. But I don't know. Maybe Wesley, maybe you have a YouTube channel, and I would love to plug it, especially if you're gonna do something like that. Have you ever thought about doing a campaign on and like recording it?
Yeah, several times. I would say the one thing holding me back is I would just need to know a little bit more about these softwares I would use to figure out how to do that from a technical standpoint. And it's not like it's hard. It's just, maybe a few more Vassal log reviews, and then I'm like, okay, let's jump up to the next big thing. How would I do a tournament, and who can I schedule with, and how are we going to do this?
Yeah, I mean like a campaign. You mean
Yeah,
how do you
yeah,
play? Because you play campaign online, right?
right. I also have played in person quite a bit too.
Okay, what do you use to play online?
Yeah, so when I play online, I'm using Tabletop Simulator, and there is a mod. I think we've talked about it in the past. I think it's just Imperial Assault 3D, and it basically has every campaign component there in the game, and we use that. And most of the game's maps are set up for you, but you can also just create maps with tiles. You can spawn in tiles. So we use that, and we use Discord to talk. So really, it would be a screen recording software and the consent of a bunch of people who, want to be a part of that.
Yeah, and I mean you could just like turn on OBS. If you get familiar with that software, it's a screen capture software. It's what I use to
Hmm.
make this show and make a lot of my videos. And I think you've used it for your own game log reviews. You just
I
turn it
actually
on.
use something called FreeCam,
Oh, okay,
and
cool.
it does get my audio, it does get the screen, but I think it's a lot less refined than what OBS sounds like it is.
I mean, you can just use FreeCam then on while you're playing one of your campaigns.
Yeah.
I have tried to use video capture software while running TTS, and it just captures like one frame every like minute. It just slows
Ooh.
down to a crawl. So I've never been able to make it work where TTS. I can't even use TTS anymore. Honestly, that program crawls for me now when I try to even just run it on its own. But um,
I mean,
the
that's very sad because it is the best way, I would say, to do campaign,
yeah.
at least online.
So maybe that's a possibility on the Second Flock's channel. But I just wanted to bring that up too because to let you know, Wesley, that the demand is there. There's somebody
Yeah.
is wants to see people playing campaign. I will say, I do have a campaign on this on my YouTube channel that was played. I think it was Twin Shadows we played in a game store. So and I recorded it with a camera, and so you get all
Hmm.
the nice game store ambient sound. But I think we played through the whole thing on camera, and that's if you go way back. I think it's one of my first set of videos was that campaign. And then the other thing you can do if you're somebody who's interested in just seeing campaign being played, like seeing other people who know what they're doing that played a lot of campaign playing. Um, wow, see my microphone's being updated in real time again. Um, yeah, there's a spike. So if you want to see people just playing campaign, you can go to Board Game Geek's Play by Forums section, and there you can view all the active campaigns, and people are playing actually by forum post, and that's a great way to see people who have been playing a lot of campaign often. Uh, playing out the matches. It's kind of interesting following it by forum post. It's a little bit it's interesting, but that's just an idea for if you're looking for campaigns being played by folks who know what they're doing.
But my short answer would be yes, that is something I'll look into. 'Cause that would be fun.
All right, so moving on, we have our rules question of the week where we like to look at a rules question that was asked since our last episode that would be interesting to talk about on the air. And the one I picked for this episode is a question about Death Troopers. I think Herbie asked this one.
Hmm.
The question was, can a Death Trooper use its ability to share power tokens while it is occupying another figure's space? And so I want to bring up the Death Trooper card here for those watching on the video. So this is for the Squad Captain ability. Once during your activation, an adjacent friendly trooper or leader may gain one power token. So the interesting answer that I actually wasn't expecting this to be true, but when I checked, it was is yes, you can use Squad Captain while your Death Trooper is occupying another figure's space. The reason for that is the rule is that for abilities that say during your activation, or used during your activation, or once during your activation, you can do that anytime during your activation except when you are resolving an action or resolving an attack. That's from the FAQ and the rules reference guide. Uh, and so when you're moving, so it depends on the movement, right?
Mhm.
So when you're moving by just spending movement points, you're not resolving an action, um, typically, because you use a move action to gain movement points. But then after that action resolves, that's when you start spending the movement points. The only
Right.
time that would be interrupting an action is if it was a special action like urgency where you gain movement points, because then you have to spend them immediately. So spending the movement points is part of resolving the action. And then in the FAQ entry, it says that you can't use those types of abilities while you're resolving an attack. So even if you're not resolving an action, if you're resolving an attack, you can't do it. So that means that if you're just spending normal movement points, you can move, move, move. You're staying on top of somebody, and then say, okay, I'm going to also use this during my activation ability, and then continue moving.
So another interesting use that I just thought of for the campaign side. So you could do this while standing in someone's space with Onar's rush ability in campaign. So I don't know if you can pull this up, but I can read it. When you enter a space adjacent to a small figure, you may push that figure up to one space, limit once per activation. So it sounds like you could move into someone's square and then push someone else from that square that you couldn't normally reach to get some more use out of that rush ability.
Now let's see.
Which, yeah, which is something that I think we most people don't realize you can do.
Which I feel like
Because again, rush in skirmish or the version of that we have is an action, but in campaign it's not. It's just a hero effect that you can do.
yeah, this is actually a different category of ability because this is on its hero card, right? It says
Yes.
when you enter a space adjacent to a small figure, you may push that figure up to one space limit once per activation. So this is like as you said, you can do this during any activation, not just during Onar's.
Mhm.
And it's anytime he enters the space adjacent to another figure. So that could be um, oh, there was my volume again. So that could be like I think he has an ability that lets him move like during at the end of another figure's activation. He has like a XP card that does that.
Right. Right. Yeah, you can't do that out of activation, I would think. Well, I guess it depends on how many movement points you have.
No, you can totally do it out of activation as long as it's during an activation. So,
Hmm.
so like he can't use rush like if he gets a movement during end of round or start of round, but nobody's activating, he can't use rush. But as long as it's during another figure's activation or during his activation, he can use it. So that's a different category though, because it's not during your activation. The one where it does apply more relevantly is Davith. So this is actually how I knew about this ruling because I remembered asking or seeing Pawsey talk about this. Davith's force speed, it says use during your activation to move up to two spaces, limit once per activation. And the question was, can I use this while I'm occupying another figure's space? Because I want to like move into a space and then use force speed to move through another figure, like a hostile figure.
Hmm.
And the answer was yes. And that's the reason why is because it's a during your activation.
Hmm.
Now the thing with Davith is you can't spend your last movement point to move on to another figure.
Yeah, I think that's always true, is you can't just end in another figure.
Yeah,
And that would have to invalidate anything else you do during that move if there's no way you can, end outside of someone's square.
yeah, but like let's say you wanted to like the only way you wanted to move through two hostile figures, but you also needed to move through one of your friendly figures to get there where you want it to be. You could move through the friendly figure. As long as you still have movement points left, you could then use Force Rush to move through those two hostile figures, and then be good to go. So that's why that matters.
I think another example here would be Sabine. You could have her move into someone's space, throw out her parting gift, and then move away.
I believe that's true. Let's see. Yep, during your activation. Yep, yeah, you can totally do that.
That's a damage ability, so that's nice. But it's not an attack, which is why it's still able to function that way.
Yep.
But to be clear, you had said that Onar's hero card was a different type of ability. Were you saying that that would work to be able to rush inside of another figure, or not work, or unsure?
Um. So it would work as long as you can legally enter that figure's space. Um. Yeah, you could use. Oh, I see what you're saying.
Mhm.
You mean to like push that figure out of the space that owner's occupying?
No, because then you wouldn't be adjacent. So we had a campaign to illustrate this where there was a mission we had to kill an Imperial officer, and the officer got surrounded by a bunch of royal guards. And at the time, it was a well enough placing that we couldn't really do anything. But looking back, if Onar had maybe moved into the space of the royal guard and then used Rush to push the Imperial officer away from the royal guard, and then used Onar's last movement point to move where that officer had been, that would have been a great way to take out that officer without all the bonuses from Royal Guard and the officer's reroll. Yeah, actually, you've posted the one and only game I've played in a while.
Oh, you know what? I just realized my mic was muted. So, I was saying that we'll talk about our games we played, and we actually haven't recorded in a while. So, Wesley, go ahead and talk about the games that you've been up to in the last month since we recorded.
Yeah, so actually, you have posted the one I have played onto your YouTube channel already. That was one of your most recent ones. It was
Oh
me
yeah.
versus Adam. Yep. And you got to see a couple of units you don't see that often on both sides. I know Adam brought K2SO and Loku, which you don't see a lot of, and I had run a spy list, and brought Agent Blaze, which I don't think I've ever seen anyone play in IACP, at least as long as I've been here. Um, and it was an idea I had, and I thought like, hey, there's a lot of spy stuff going on now, but even more like there's so many bonuses and buffs that you get from all these support units, focuses, and power tokens and command cards. And I wanted to make a list that just kind of stripped away as much of those bonuses as it could and left you with just your base units, and then had a strong enough kind of set of buffs and cohesion on my side to overcome your base units. So it started with a couple of the ISB officer cards, or ISB, I don't know what they're called, agents. And then you put generals ranks on them, and they're able to let each other attack outside of turn. So they're attacking with +1s, they get hidden all the time, but they're also spies, so they can play the amazing spy cards, and they can make it so your opponents cannot use any command cards while it's their turn. And they basically get 3 attacks for 7 points each activation. So I combine that with figures like Agent Callus and Agent Blaze. Callus to help me draw cards and spread out more power tokens to make the ISB agents even stronger, And also, when an opponent plays a command card each round, Callus and Blaze have a trigger on that. So I remember there was one point where in that match with Adam, I played Inspiring Speech, which was going to have Callus give two of my ISB officers or ISB units. It was going to give two of them focus, and he goes, "Well, I have a couple spies. I'm going to play Comms Disrupt and negate it." And it's like, okay, well, I don't get the two focuses, but because you played a command card, Callus is going to give them each a power token, and Blaze is going to give someone hidden. So for using a command card to stop me from getting two buffs, you gave me three buffs. And that was kind of the gist of the list is let's make everything that's related to buffs and bonuses kind of hard for you and make it harder for you to play command cards. I know when you were casting over our game, you got a little excited when I had Rest in Peace in the deck. And that's because I was like, yeah, this is an anti-command card deck. I don't want you to get anything back. I don't want you to use Leia to get, a second Son of Skywalker or Knowledge and Defense. And I think in that game, I was like, well, he doesn't have many of those effects, maybe Knowledge and Defense, but I think I'm just going to play this and try and draw a card this round.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that I didn't like was when he used Intel Leak on me. And, I had thought long and hard about whether to bring Smuggling Compartment and had decided against it. But I think spies are getting even more popular now. But I don't know what to pull out of the deck for it. I feel like Doubt is a good one, but I also, if I wanted to put it Smuggling Compartment, but I feel like Doubt is a very good, like a thesis statement for the entire list I was running. It's like, yeah, let's take all your cards away, and when you do something good, I'm gonna, mitigate or disrupt that. Let's make you reroll. But the full game is on TV Boy's channel, so if you guys want to see that, it was a fun one with a lot of units you don't see too often, a lot of cards you don't see too often as well. I do plan to run that list a little bit more, and I've learned a few things. I just still need to decide where I can squeeze Smuggling Compartment in there.
Yeah, and that was kind of my whole thing with Smuggling Compartment when it first came out was like, it's really good. It's really good against spies. It's obviously what it's designed for, but it's also really good with spies because then you have full act control over, the whole command card game, and your opponent can't do anything about it to you by trying to use spy cards to counter you. Because that's often what
Yeah.
you see is spy cards used to counter spy cards, spy versus spy, the whole thing. Um, I thinking about what you were just saying about doubt. I think that makes sense, honestly, to cut doubt for Smuggling Compartment because with doubt and Smuggling Compartment, the whole point of doubt is to punish your opponent for being passive and trying to wait. But spies kind of do that with strat shift already, right?
Mhm.
You have strategic shift in your deck, and so
Yeah.
assuming you draw that um, by turn two or even turn three, like you have a way to punish your opponent if they're not trying to be more active.
Yeah, yeah, but I think, like in the game, Mara had focus on round one, and she was able to move up, but I positioned just enough so that she couldn't reach an attack.
Hmm.
And like for me, the doubt was, okay, now she's not focused, so she might not one shot these guys anymore. But I see but that does sound like some good wisdom. Because the other one I'm considering is extra armor, but just from that one game alone, extra armor saved at least two of my guys for an entire action. Like that one point was the difference at least twice in that game.
Yeah, I could see extra armor being important, especially for keeping those ISBs alive.
Oh yeah. But another thing was, my opponent had smuggling compartment, and part of my strategy was, well, I've got so many abilities that mess with your command cards that I might actually be able to pull two off in a round and
Hmm.
like get you anyways. I think you commented on that at one point where I used interrogate with Blaze to look at his hand and he didn't smuggling compartment and you weren't sure why. But I was actually hoping that he would because I had strat shift in my hand. And at some point after he did that and still had smuggling compartment. I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to get off strat shift. I'm going to pitch this for Zillow.
So maybe that's what it was. Is he didn't use it because he knew that strat shift was still there and was still a threat to his hand.
Yeah.
Like save it
Yeah,
for
that was a fun
maybe a
game,
threat.
and I will probably run that list again.
Nice. All right. Well,
Maybe with that doubt change and a couple command card changes. There's another thing I realized is I'm running a lot of low point cards in that deck, and um, for interrogate, if you do want to get rid of one of your opponent's cards, you need a higher cost card to do that. So I might want to switch one or two things in there.
that makes sense. All right. Any other gameplay you want to talk about?
That is it right now.
Okay. Well, I have not been playing much games. I have been doing a lot of updates to my custom campaign, but I think we'll save that for another video when there's more to talk about because it's still very much in testing.
I
But
mean,
we
that might even be something I'd be willing to make a video on playing through it.
that would be awesome. Okay, but we did have two tournaments in December. They're kind of two mini tournaments, though. Usually, I put up a poll online with the community to see when people are available. Oh, my cat. He's up. Sorry. So anyway, usually I put up a poll to see when people are available to play in these free Vassal tournaments. And this for December, we had kind of an even split. People were saying, I can't do this, but I can do this. So I said, okay, I don't want to run. You know, I wasn't quite sure what to do, so I said, you know what, I'll split it up here between the 2 days that everybody are saying they're available, and we'll do like two mini tournaments basically, and we'll have the winner of each one play each other for the final prize. So that's what we ended up doing. So we had a tournament on the 10th with 4 people, and then just yesterday we had a tournament with 4 more people. And I think the only common person between them was Herbie. So
I was expecting Kyle to defend his title.
yeah, he didn't show up yesterday, so I guess he is eager to see a new challenger for the cards. But let's go over the. We're gonna go over really quickly the lists here, and I'll probably edit in the list on for the video. So for the 10th, we had first place Kyle, 3-0, playing Empire, and he was running Palpatine with Motivation, Heavy Stormtrooper with Targeting Computer, another Heavy Stormtrooper with Suppressive Fire, Elite Death Trooper, Elite E-Web with the General's Ranks, Officer with Advanced Comm System, Heavy Fire, Zillow, and Rule by Fear. And we'll go over the command cards for this one. He was playing Overwhelming Impact, Reduce to Rubble, Call the Vanguard, Negation, Induce Rage, Concentrated Fire, Urgency, Change of Plans, Disorient, Dark Energy, Planning, Element, Take Initiative, Collateral Damage, and Covering Fire. And I probably won't read the command cards for the other list, just the two that won each tournament. But just quick thoughts, like pretty interesting list. I think he's got an attachment on almost everything, which is kind of crazy to think about. I think only his Death Trooper doesn't have an attachment, and this is kind of like a heavy weapons Imperial list with Palpatine here. So, what do we think? Do you have any thoughts on Kyle's 3-0 list from 1210?
Yeah, I am seeing a little more often people. I see that the eWeb has generals ranks, and I've been seeing people use, including myself in the spy list, using like a single officer in their generals ranks list, but pairing it with somebody using motivation to save a point on a second officer. And motivation does a few other things, but I think the motivation going from 1 point to 3 points of movement is quite potent, and you really don't need as many officers when you do that.
Yeah, that was really interesting when I saw that. I had not seen. I don't think I've ever seen anybody put the general's ranks on the e-web. You almost always see it with
Yeah, me either.
You almost always see it with either Lion Ambush or the card that we made
Overwatch.
for it, Overwatch. Yeah, but that combo with motivation that you just mentioned, which we see here with Palpatine, is seems very potent. To be able to move it 3 spaces for no action with Palpatine, which we have seen. We've seen a lot of Palpatine with motivation.
Hmm.
He doesn't have general's ranks on the heavies either, so he's pretty much using that on the E-Web, which is really clever. So,
Yeah.
and then,
And induced rage isn't a card I've seen very often, but it makes sense with the heavy fire.
yeah, well, I think Disorient's the one that where they take a damage. If they take damage, you can discard a condition from them, right?
Hmm.
So I wonder
Yep.
if Disorient is there something in this list that is stunning his own figures.
Well, disorient is for if you hit an opponent who has a positive condition, you discard that positive condition and give them 2 strain.
Yeah, so I was thinking
So
for Induced Rage, because that's the one that at the start of the round you discard a. You can choose 2 figures, discard conditions from them, and then they gain power tokens.
yeah, I think that's heavy fire.
Oh, because of the stun from heavy fire. Okay, so that's why that's
Right.
in there. That makes sense.
Yep.
Because I was thinking of Disorient works really well with heavy fire too, because you can ping damage onto people that you're not attacking, and then you can strip their focus tokens.
Weird to see dark energy with only one force user.
Yeah, I wonder what's up with that.
Probably to pull someone in line of sight of the Emperor ability and do a little damage.
Using it on a friendly figure. Do you think?
No, I don't even know if you can. I mean
I don't
like,
think so.
I can see an E-Web who has a harder time getting around the map. Maybe is just out of line of sight. Uh, Palpatine uses motivation, helps him get closer, but he's missing that 1 point of movement or adjustment. And Palpatine just pulls the one figure that's expertly placed by his opponent out of place one space with dark energy, and suddenly the Emperor ability lets the E-Web fire off into him.
Hmm, that's interesting. You could also use it to set
That
up like blast with the heavy troopers.
Oh yeah, Blast 2. That's also probably a good part of this. Choose another small figure. Okay, yeah, it can be any small figure. So you could use it to get your own heavy troopers into position to attack as well. I never thought about using it that way though.
I have a feeling he's probably not using it that way because it would deal a damage to them, but it is pretty flexible and versatile.
I I would take a damage to do the right attack.
That's fair. Okay, well, let's move on. I wanted to just mention what else was in that tournament. At 2-1, we had Herbie, who was playing his double Rancor list, which we'll talk about in a minute here. And then at 1-2, so 1 win, 2 losses, we had Josh, who was also playing a Rancor list, a single Rancor. It's Rancor, Jabba, Afra, regular Lothcat, Bib Fortuna, 2 regular Jawas. Well, I'm going to put it up. I'll just put it up on the screen so we won't read it out. But I just wanted to note here 2 Rancor lists. And then I think the fourth place person was also running an Imperial trooper
Kane
list.
Somos.
Yeah, so Kane Somos with some snow troopers and dewbacks. But I went 0-3, so just
Oh,
wanted.
I think that's usually a high placing list. No, it's not. We don't see Kane Somos. We see
But
that with Taro.
yeah, so just giving some context there to what Kyle was playing against in his tournament, and then for the tournament that happened yesterday on 12/17, and oh, there goes my audio. And so this one,
I do respect the Kane pick though.
yeah, I actually have a video coming up that features um, a Kane Somos list beating Herbie's double Rancor list. Spoilers,
Yeah.
but it
Nice.
was a really interesting match. So I hope to get that one up soon. But it's also relevant because it was a list that was played in the 12/17 tournament. So we'll talk about that in a second too. So 12/17 yesterday, we actually had a three-way tie for first place, and Joey ended up winning based off of tiebreakers. So we'll put his list up on the screen here for everybody to look at. And for our audio listeners, I'll go ahead and read off the list from Joey. It was 2 ISB Infiltrator Elites, 1 Grand Inquisitor, Agent Callus, 2 Purge Troopers, Imperial Officer Zillow Technique, Rule by Fear and Doubt. And the command card list was Assassinate, Calm Disruption, Tools for the Job, Dying Lunge, Intelligence Leak, Primary Target, Strategic Shift, Negation, Death Blow, Pummel, Element of Surprise, Fleet Footed, Urgency, Looking for a Fight, and Planning. Um, but basically a double ISB list like you were talking about, except he is running Inquisitor and
Mm.
Purge Troopers. So we have double Purge Trooper here winning this tournament on tiebreakers. Um, I don't know. I'm really looking forward to seeing this in action. I wasn't able to live stream, but I'm hoping to do some game log reviews for this event. Inquisitor with 2 Purge Troopers and Elite ISBs. So like Purge Troopers are brawlers. I think Callus is a brawler,
He is.
but you don't really see much crossover. I see Dying Lunge in the command cards, um, which I'll post up on the screen as well. So what do we think about this one, this list?
I am trying to figure out what the ISBs are doing here. Because I see Inquisitor is a hunter, Purge Troopers are hunters, Callus is hunters, and you have 2 troopers in the Purge Troopers, and then you just got 4 spies just hanging out.
Well, Callus is a spy brawler,
Ah, yeah,
so you have 3 spies, and we do see Calm Disruption.
yes, which makes sense. This is something hard to make of. I think it's less about the trait synergy here and more about power.
Now the
Trying to
IS
figure out what the strategy is, though.
the ISBs can target the Purge Trooper.
Ah, yeah.
So let's see, Purge Trooper.
I wonder, but Purge troopers tend, at least in my opinion, to do a lot better on their own activations. Personally, I've kind of learned that Call the Vanguard isn't as worth it on them.
So you can't use the batons with the ISBs because it's only during activation. But
Mhm.
Electro Hammer does trigger off any attack. The Electro Pulse spread damage ability.
What about the staff?
Staff is on any attack, but it has special conditions you have to meet from the defender. So maybe
But
he
you're also
was.
not getting on the hunt.
Yeah, that's true. That's
And
true. You don't get that plus
yeah,
one, but maybe for the spread damage, it's worth it. I don't know.
maybe.
So
I mean, we don't really know which loadouts he was using,
yeah, I don't know. I don't know. He
but I would
doesn't.
imagine either hammers or staffs for the reach.
Yeah, but
I mean, he won. He's doing something right.
yeah. I mean, it was a 3-way um,
Hmm.
draw, 2-1 with 2 other players, and I'll mention really quickly it because I learned how tiebreakers work for round robin. It's different from Swiss. You for round robin, the tiebreaker is you look at each player and their results against the other tied players that they're tied with, and all 3 of these players they each had a 1-1 result against each other. Um, so I think like Joey beat Josh, Josh beat Herbie, Herbie beat Joey. So we were didn't have a tiebreaker there. So then you had to look at the difference between each player's VPs that they got, and then minus the VPs their opponents got, and then that way. So
Hmm.
so basically, who won big and lost small, and
Yep.
that was Joey. He had much bigger wins, and he had a very very close loss. So that's why he ended up getting the first place in tiebreakers. But we'll talk about the other 2 2-1s that were tied with Joey. So second place was Herbie, and he was playing his double Rancor list that I think has been a lot of people that play ICP are familiar with now. Um,
Yep.
and I don't know much to what else to talk about it other than that it's really well designed list, and I think it's doing good work for him. Basically, Beast Tamer with the Rancors, you feed them the regular Jawas to give them extra activations, and you have two Rancors so that when your first one goes down, your opponent has to deal with the second one.
Yeah, changed my mind on the Savage Vigor card with lists like this.
Oh yeah.
Used to think it was bad. Now it's scary. It's too much defense.
Yeah, it's been interesting. There's been talk, I mean, in the steering committee about the one of the big combos this list has is Dr. Afra replaying Survival Instincts,
Mm,
which is
that's cool.
that's the one that gives the Rancor +1 block and +1 evade. So being able to replay that with Afra is pretty strong, on top of like power tokens and stuff like that.
From my perspective though, what I see here is it's still not winning events. It seems like a second place list a lot of the time.
Yeah, Herbie's got
Um,
maybe some bad luck.
yeah, well, I don't know. It just seems like, even if there are parts of this list that are bonkers, there's enough holding it back that I think it's in a good place. It's like, cool, Rancor did good, right where it should be. And even if it did a little better, that'd just be like, go Rancor.
Yeah, I think Ranker's
That's
in
how
a
I
good
feel.
place. I agree.
Yeah.
All right, moving on
Yeah.
to the third 2-in-1 list was Josh, playing basically a hunter list, and I don't know if there's much to call out about this one. We're seeing kind of
You
the same
don't see elite
stuff.
Claudites too often.
Yeah, that's true. So we can talk about the Claudite. I don't see any spy cards in his command deck though.
I earlier this season I had a list and I only used it once or twice, but it had an elite Claudite, and it wasn't for the spy cards, it was for the power tokens with the senator form. And
Right.
then round two, you turn it into I think it's the scout, but it's the one with longer range, and it just becomes a long range hunter that you just try to keep safe.
Yeah,
But
which is pretty much standard. Usually you see Claudites played with like figures that get automatically focused, like BT or IG88, because they're so good at giving out power tokens. But the only one I see is Cad Bane, who actually wants to be focused.
yeah, I mean, I know hunters like they do so much damage with one attack, and sometimes you get two, and they can take out high value figures, or at least very close to it. And then you have cards like Bib that add damage, and they have a lot of CCs that add damage. And so I think it might be a shift towards the Claudites being able to add even more damage, just adding that little pip extra. They're also six cost, which this whole list seems like it's made for strength in numbers.
Yeah, would definitely be good, and we do see that. Um,
And Vinto probably benefits from power tokens a lot.
yep, yeah, I was gonna say that too. I think Vinto makes sense because you can only have focused or hidden on the first attack, so having that power token you can spend on the second one is pretty useful.
Although, well, you can always rehide after the first attack
Uh,
if you get the search.
that's true, but then you're not using. You might not have a surge left for +1 or Pierce 2.
Yeah,
But
it's a tricky thing with Vinto.
yeah, so I think the power token makes sense for him. Okay, and then the other. I'll just mention the other list that was there. The fourth list was Empire list with two Dark Troopers, an E-Web, and Iden and Kane Somos again. And I'll mention this that this list was the one that I saw beat Herbie's double Rancor list. So the results here, I would not have predicted that based on what I'd seen previously. But looks like Herbie was able to win the day on the day that it mattered, the tournament day. But
Dark Troopers, that's interesting.
yeah,
I don't think you have the command list here. I don't see much to do with droids, but they are troopers, so that's cool.
Yep. So, so again, let's see. So Joey's list is going to be playing against Kyle for the finals there, and the winner gets the prize of the season 7 deployment cards.
Now that'll be one worth streaming, I think.
Yeah, we'll definitely try to get that one going. Okay, well, let's get into our main topic here, and while I am opening up my map image that I didn't have open, Wesley, do you want to go ahead and introduce the map that we're going to be talking about?
Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about Devaron Garrison. This map rotated in much earlier this year, and I think it's been a month or two since we've had Tibana facility enter, which means within another 2 or 3 months, Deveron's going to be rotating out. And Noah thought it would be nice to do another analysis video on the maps, and if we're going to do one, we should do one on the map that's about to leave rotation. Um, this is a small map and it's kind of got a center lane with a few doors, and it's got a lane all the way over to the right with a few extra objectives compared to the middle lane. And what you see a lot of in this map is if you have melee lists, you're going down the center and trying to just get into a big fight with your opponent. And if you don't have that kind of melee list, you're trying to either play both angles or run down the long path to the right to get away from your opponent's melee list. But I think this is a really nicely designed map. I've had a lot of fun on this one, and I'm going to be sad when it goes. This is the first map that rotated in for me after I started playing, and it's been a lot of fun. This one's got 2 missions, so I'll do, but the first one is arm salvage, and both missions make use of 5 crates that are scattered throughout the map. So, first mission is the start of each round. You're going to place a power token on each crate according to the crate's color. And there are 2 positions that have power tokens, 2 crates that give defense power tokens, and one that gives a surge power token in the middle of the map on the right side. And at the end of each round, whoever controls that crate can distribute that many power tokens to their figures that are adjacent to the crate, and they gain 2 VPs. And there is an interesting bit about that in terms of crate distribution that I think a lot of players tend to mix up, but I'm sure we'll get into that once we get past the overview. And there are 3 doors, and doors are not locked in this mission. So you just open them whenever you want. And then secure munitions is the B scenario here. In this one, the doors are locked, and the crates, instead of having power tokens or anything, they are these objectives that have 5 health and 1 defense. You can shoot at them, you can attack them. If they're destroyed, they blow up, and all figures and objects adjacent to them suffer 2 damage. So they explode and do a blast. But the idea is at the end of each round, if you control a crate at the end of the round, you can push it up to 3 spaces, and if they're in your deployment zone, you count as having 6 additional VPs. So the idea is round 1, round 2, maybe into round 3, you're kind of fighting for control of these crates in the center of the map, moving them to your deployment zones. Once you get them in there, they are a 6 VP swing, which is pretty big, but they can still be destroyed by your opponents, maybe even blowing up your own figures, but you do need your figures next to them in order to move them, so there's a push and pull there. Additionally, the doors at the end of each round, if you control a terminal, you choose and open a door. And it's not optional, so if you wanted the doors to stay closed, you're not drawing command cards. But for the most part, by the end of round 2, all the doors are going to be open. And the doors open before you move the crates. What's interesting with this map is that there are doors that kind of block easy access to the crates. But once the doors open, you almost have just a straight shot from deployment zone to deployment zone with the crates in the middle. And I think that basically covers it.
Yeah,
for
so
the overview at least.
yeah, I think you did a great job there. Sorry, I was just taking forever for my Vassal program to load, but yeah, you described it really well. I think the things to mention are that straight. You mentioned there's a straight shot from deployment zone to deployment zone. It is still blocked by some blocking terrain in terms of line
Mhm.
of sight, but yeah, definitely easy to move to attack. So deployment zones are not safe from each other really on this map. Let's see.
Even though there are doors, there are, some figures that can just move 5 around and get line of sight to the opponent's deployment zone. Like first turn if you want.
Yep. So talking about the layout here, you kind of mentioned it really well. The the deployment zones are very close. So I don't know if you mentioned this, but a figure starting off in one deployment zone can move 4 to 5 spaces and have line of sight into the opponent's deployment zone even before any doors open.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, I just covered that.
so very important to keep your figures safe in your deployment zone by not leaving them like in that doorway, but keeping them back behind the wall. You really want to deploy using those like far right 2 columns in your deployment zone, and that way you should be mostly safe from a round one attack from your opponent.
Mhm.
Um, Talking about terrain, did you mention terrain on the map already?
Not very much.
Yeah, so we've got blocking terrain on the left and right paths. So the left path has the blue objectives, and the right one has the red and the yellow. The terrain, it's mostly just line of sight blocking on this map. Um, there's not a lot of, especially blocking terrain that is really obstructing movement all that much.
There
Um,
is a particular tree to the right of the red deployment zone that I think makes it harder to move up into the center on the right line.
yeah, definitely true. So that one is one where having mobile would be quite advantageous, especially if you're a small figure, is being able to move back and forth across that tree. But otherwise, it's mostly for line of sight blocking. Um, we'll mention that the non-massive large figures do have a hard time on this map, especially if they don't have mobile, because those blocking terrains for normal small figures that can just move diagonally around them, they are kind of a pain for large figures if they're not mobile or massive to move around. So let's talk about the deployment zones. This is kind of one of the more important things on these map analysis. So the blue deployment zone, in my opinion, has two distinct advantages over the red. The first one is that they have this wall here. I'm showing it on the YouTube video, but on the right side of the map, by the red and yellow deployment objectives, they have this wall that extends one space further out than the wall on the red deployment side. And that gives them a really good line of sight advantage where they can hide back here and move one space out and be able to see really well, or even 2 spaces and be able to see really well. And the red side has to stay quite far ways back away from the objectives if they want to be safe.
Hmm.
And in fact, the blue deployment zone player can put their figure right here up and to the right of the red objective that's closest to them, and they actually cannot be seen by the blue player unless they move quite far up, like almost next to the yellow objective.
Yeah, I that is one thing that I would noticed on this map. And I usually don't go far enough into, analyzing maps to kind of figure those special spaces out. But I did on this one figure out that blue has that incredibly valuable space where the objective's yours, unless they're going to come fight you like in your face.
Yep. I was gonna use the line of sight tool, but it looks like it's actually down today, so that's unfortunate.
Really? I had it up, I have it up right now.
Oh, nice. So I don't know where exactly. Do you know where if a figure is standing on the red, right next to the red objective? What
Hmm.
is the farthest away that the red deployment zone player can see them? Like how far do they have to move
So
up?
right, so the red deployment zone.
I think I can
Um,
probably do it. Let's see.
yeah, see if you can. But if let me check again, the show note. Yeah, okay. So from that spot, the blue deployment zone player can basically see all the way down the center lane, basically the hall of the red player's map. Like basically everything except that one corner by the tree, that's hidden. And the red player basically has to move all the way up past the first tree or past the first blocking terrain in that middle area. They have to move basically to that very center spot in order to start seeing the blue player who is holding that
So they
objective.
have to be one space north of their red objective.
One space north of their red objective. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I think on this side too. So they have to be way up into that area to be able to even shoot this space. So yeah, that's a big advantage to the
Hmm.
blue deployment zone.
Yeah.
The other advantage to the blue deployment zone is in this blue crate area. Their crate is in a spot where they can stand a figure right here, and they are protected from both this side of the map and from the opponent's deployment zone as well, going this way in terms of line of sight. And it's not true for the red player. If they want to have somebody controlling this blue crate, they have to stand at least here, which takes can be seen from both this part of the map. I'm highlighting it with my cursor. This area, which is very easy to attack from the blue deployment zone, and also all the way up here, is also able to attack that blue crate space. So the blue crates are also much better for the blue deployment zone.
I had not thought of that. That is, I mean, that's really good. I'm gonna have to look at your video, look at this, watch this back to see the video portion of it, to get some more tips on which positionings I can actually use the best. But I
Yes,
did not really put that together about how safe you are with the blue
but to
crates if you're on blue.
yeah, to help people who are maybe listening on the audio podcast, because definitely follow us on that. Um, there's that cross-shaped blocking terrain on the left side of the map where the blue crates are, and there's a blue crate like opposite diagonal sides of that cross. If you're on the blue deployment zone, you can control the blue crate and have the blocking terrain like surrounding your figure in such a way that you can't be seen from the middle of the map, from the middle doorway, and you cannot be seen from your opponent's deployment zone either.
Mm.
And
Hmm.
further describing it, if you're on the red deployment zone, the blue crate is positioned in that cross-shaped blocking terrain in such a way that in order to be controlling it, you have to have your figure be exposed to both um, the that upper right room that's kind of between the blue deployment zone and the blue
Hmm.
crates, and also be exposed to the middle doorway from the right side of the map.
Yeah.
So I
And
would
that
yeah,
middle doorway is interesting.
yeah, let's talk
I
about it.
think, yeah, I think this is one that a lot of time people kind of forget. I think, at least in my mind, this map is segmented into two lanes, and usually at some point, someone will just open the middle door, and I'll just go, "Oh God, it's just one big room now."
Yeah, definitely. It is still. I mean, yeah, that's mostly true. I think the right side room actually has an advantage there because it is easier to hide from the left side of the map on the right side than it is for folks on the left side to hide from the right side of the map. You have to basically be standing behind that cross-shaped blocking terrain if you're on the left side to be safe from the right side of the map. So
Yeah.
I think it's actually better to control the right side of the map than the left side because you also have more objectives on that side. And if you have ranged figures, you can basically take shots at people in the left side of the map freely if you're on the right side.
Yeah, but I think people tend to be so ready to get into the action, especially if you get a melee list, that I tend to see two-thirds of the figures going left and trying to fight it out there, and maybe a third of the army at most goes to the right and tries to have a mini skirmish on their end of the map.
Yeah. So let's talk about different strategies for different types of lists. You mentioned melee lists. They typically want to. Oh, did we talk about the doors being locked and unlocked on different missions?
Yeah, so armed salvage mission A, we mentioned that they're just unlocked. You just open them with an action. And then mission B, they're locked and they open at the end of a round. Each player chooses one if they control a terminal, which is almost always. So by the end of round two, they'll all be open,
Right.
typically.
So that's important because that'll determine how safe you are from that middle doorway. Um, so if you're playing a close range list, so a melee list or any list that is like doesn't really do well at long range and wants to close the gap quickly, you typically will want to stay on the left side of the map and use that blue crate room to get your figures up to your opponent's deployment zone. Because otherwise, it's a very long way to go around the green side, the right side of the map.
Yep.
And then conversely, if you're playing a list that is more long ranged, you want to head away from the blue side of towards the right side of the map, and that's because if you're in the top right or bottom right corners of the map, you have a lot of open space around you that your opponent has to cross to be able to get to you, and it's quite good for sniper lists actually.
Yeah.
Um, and then the reason I brought up the difference between the doors is you need to be aware of the door, which mission you're playing, and how the doors work. Because if you're trying to move your figures up through that blue crate room, um, and then your opponent is trying to go around on the right side of the map, to get away from you, you might find that all of a sudden that middle door is opening round one, and your figures that you thought were safe in that blue crate room from your opponent now all of a sudden are basically fish in a barrel.
Of course, you could do it opposite and, you know, instead of going for those crates, you go for where that door is when you see your opponent going right. You just wait for it to open.
Yep, and that's something else that you can do. That's actually one thing that the red deployment zone has is it has this little nook here that kind of goes past the doorway if you're on the left side of the map,
Hmm.
and if you can tuck
Hmm.
figures in there if your opponent is fully committing to the right side, and they're pretty hard to get to, and then they can pop out and attack your opponent if you have enough movement points. The only problem with that is that if you put somebody here, then if your opponent has anything over here, they can just wreck you um,
Yeah.
in their
And
deployment
usually you
zone. I
don't
mean,
get that much advantage to know their entire list is going right.
yeah, usually your opponent will keep something in their deployment zone tucked behind their wall just to punish you in case you try to just come out in the open and rush them
Hmm.
while they're moving all the rest of their figures to the right side. So if you're going to go through the blue crate room and they're on the mission where the doors open automatically, you want to try and keep them to the left of that blocking terrain formation so that the opponent cannot just draw a line of sight into your figures down that middle area when the door opens in round two. But
Right.
also you have to keep in mind that your opponent can, on the other mission, can open the door manually. So if you rush a bunch of guys into this blue objective room in the middle on the left side of the map, and then your opponent just comes up and like, okay, open the door, and all of a sudden, uh-oh, you're gonna get shot from your opponent's deployment zone. So it's actually not as clear cut for melee figures as it would initially seem if your opponent knows
Yeah.
what they're doing.
But I do think it's a fun place for melee figures.
Yes, because they can cross the map much easier than other maps, so that when you need to reposition a melee figure to counter your opponent's positioning, it's not as difficult as on a bigger map.
I think one thing I heard mentioned when this map first came in to rotation, if I guess whether or not the doors are opened, you can go from your deployment zone to your opponent's deployment zone in 9 spaces.
Yep. So, which is why if you are not someone who wants to have that fight, then you should not be in your deployment zone at the end of round one. Like you need to evacuate.
Yeah,
Um,
but it makes it so that, characters like Garkan or Hero Luke, those are melee guys, but they can move 8 and still attack. Yeah, so one little push from a Gideon or a Heart of Freedom, and they are swinging at you round one, and you need to get out of there if you don't want to have that kind of fight with them.
yeah, and that also means you need to be very intentional with your deployment, more so than other
Hmm.
maps where you don't have to worry about getting attacked in your deployment zone, right?
Yeah, you are
Um,
not safe.
yeah, deployment zone's not just because you have a deployment zone border around a space, that space is not safe. So that's why I mentioned, let me show it on the screen. Um, you want to be using these far right two columns mostly to deploy your forces, so that way they're not getting shot at round one. Same thing for the red deployment zone down here, far right two
I
columns.
think I think this map tends to have a high Jabba mortality rate.
Yes, definitely.
Poor guy.
Poor guy. Yeah, the supports tend to go down first on this map if both players are playing optimally. If not playing optimally, then somebody dies a tragic death because they were somewhere they shouldn't have been. Looking at my notes here. Oh, the objectives. Let's talk about objectives. So secure munitions has the objectives where the crates move, but you can destroy them. They're 5 health, 1 block. You should always be looking for opportunities to destroy these crates if you can, especially if you can't control them. If you know your opponent's going to be controlling them, because they're worth 6 VPs each. So destroying a crate
Yeah.
that your opponent would have gotten can be a huge swing, and you can destroy them after they've been scored too, which is important to remember. Your opponent doesn't gain VPs when they go into their deployment zone; they count as having VPs. So if you destroy that crate, they no longer count as having 6 VPs from that crate.
Yep. Easy come, easy go.
Yeah, and 5 health is not hard to destroy for most lists. Also, if you time it
Yeah.
right, you can um, catch your opponent's figure standing on the crate and get them with some damage.
You have it really right. You can destroy one of your opponent's crates that's next to another crate, and it'll help destroy that crate.
Yep, because the splash damage affects objects as well.
Yes. Yeah. So that's some really good information about secure munitions. And when you look at arms salvage, on the other hand, one of the things I've noticed is a lot of players tend to think that it's like at the end of each round, each crate just passes out a token, power token of some kind. But I have found a lot where, especially round one, like the middle crate or in the blue crates especially, you might not have one player controlling it. You might have, last activation, someone runs up and grabs your blue crate to contest, or in the right area of the map, someone isn't really able to control one of the red ones, or especially the yellow one, or you contest it. And the way that the mission is worded is you place a power token on each crate at the start of each round. So if it takes until the end of round two or round three for one team to control the blue crate, let's say the blue crate in the top left, the first time it's controlled is at the end of round three. You get to distribute 3 block tokens to your figures that are on or adjacent to that crate, not one.
hmm Okay, good news. I got the line of sight tool working.
Nice.
And important because I did want to mention that this is actually a pretty good map for Han Solo and Migs Mayfeld as well in ICP for return fires shenanigans. There's a lot of spots where you can put Han or Migs where there's no one-way line of sight to them, which is important because that's how you counter their return fire abilities is through one-way line of sight. So just looking,
And there's
go
not
ahead.
many spots where it works like that in this map.
Right, exactly. Or there's a lot of spots where I wouldn't say that. There's a lot of spots where you can put Han and know that he is safe from a one-way attack.
Mm-hmm.
So, like for example, on my map here, you can put Han on where the blue crates are,
Hmm.
either behind it or for either side, and there is no way to attack him without him being able to see you. Looks like the only example is if you have Han here, so where the upper left blue crate is. The only way to attack with a one-way line of sight is from the blocking terrain in the blue deployment zone, two spaces to the left of that. Here, assuming the door is open, of course.
Yeah, nice.
Same thing for if you put it on the opposite side. Here, on the bottom left of that cross-shaped blocking terrain, there's actually no way to attack him without triggering return fire. I think there's a few more. Let's see if I can find them. In the right side of the map, two spaces left of the bottom red objective. That is also, there's no way to attack that space without it seeing you back. Not that one, this one. There's a few others, so if you play around, you can actually control, if you stand on the top red objective, that is also a spot where you can not be attacked without being able to see back to the attacker. There's quite a few of these spots, and so by the way, that's something that you should be doing if you're playing Han or Migs in ICP. Is you should be looking for spots on the map, usually using this line of sight tool, where you can put a figure where you can put your Han, and the opponent cannot draw a line of sight to Han from a space that Han cannot see.
Yeah, that's really important.
If you're using the line of sight tool, this basically is a space where if you have attacker and defender on, you should only, when you click on a space, you want to only see green highlighted spaces and yellow highlighted spaces. Blue highlighted spaces that are not green are bad because those are spaces that can see you, but you cannot see them.
If you're on the blue deployment zone,
Hmm.
we talked about that spot to the top right being pretty safe for characters. There are a couple of blue spots though. Uh, if you want to be 100% safe, you with Han or something, you go on the crate itself. That is one of those safe spaces where you're not safe, but if you shoot, Han's going to get to shoot back. Because,
Yeah,
like you said, it doesn't have any blue in the tool.
yeah. So the bottom left of that cross doesn't have any blue.
The bottom left of the cross.
Yeah.
Hmm. I was saying on, like, if you stand in the top red crate, it's one of those spaces as well.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I think
You're a
there's
little more exposed, but if you want to get return fire, you can control that objective and get your return fire.
yeah. That's what I said was if you stand on the
Yeah.
red crate.
Yeah.
Yep, you're right. But anyway, let's see. Is there anything else that we need to talk about? I think that's kind of it, right?
This map tends to lead to good slugfests when both players are playing melee lists.
Yeah. I've also seen
The
lots
last
of.
tournament I was in, we had a good old slugfest in round two of the tournament. It's a Scum Jedi list versus a Rebel Jedi list, and I think by the end of round one, we were both down one or two of our big figures, and by the end of round two, the game was almost over. So I think melee lists can have a lot of fun here, especially against melee lists.
Yeah, things escalate very quickly on this map. Um, but
That's a good way to put it.
I've seen lots of kiting on this map where you can kite your opponent and kind of just stay one step ahead of them and away from them if they're trying to close distance to you by going through the right side of the map. Um, and Like we saw that with I think Herbie versus Adams Wookiees, where he just kept
Mm.
moving his figures away, and the Wookiees just kind of chased him, and it was kind of a merry-go-round of Wookiees trying to catch up to the ranged figures that were taking shots at him.
Mm.
But I like
Yeah.
this map. I was worried about it when we first rotated in, even though I have wanted this to be a tournament map since I saw it. I saw this map, back in like 2018 or whatever, and I was like, this is cool. Like, this is a nice design. Like, this is good objectives. Like, this would be a cool tournament map, but it never made it into official play. So I'm glad we have it in IACP and it's getting used.
Yeah. Yeah. Me too. This is good. This has been one of my favorite maps.
Nice. All right, so I think that's going to do it for today's episode. Thanks everybody for watching. Wesley, do you have anything you want to plug before we go?
Hmm. Just my YouTube channel.
Nice. So I'll link that in the description. Thanks everybody for watching. We hope to see you next time. And remember, check out the podcast. The audio podcast is up on Spotify as well as Apple Podcasts for you to
Nice.
enjoy. And we will see you all later for the next episode.
Goodbye, users from outside YouTube. And goodbye, users in YouTube.